Have you ever noticed that the more you care about the opinions of others, the less you matter to yourself? That the more you seek approval, the further you get from your own approval? Michel de Montaigne, in the 16th century, already knew something that most men today still haven't discovered. True power isn't in conquering the world, but in not needing to conquer anything. He wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. But we modern men spend our entire lives belonging to everyone but ourselves, to the boss who humiliates us, to the woman who ignores us, to friends who judge us, to parents who are never satisfied. And amidst so much giving, we remain empty, strangers in our own skin." This isn't another video about cheap stoicism, about pretending that nothing affects you. This is about something much deeper and more liberating. It's about the brutal philosophy of a man who spent his life studying himself and discovered that true freedom begins when you stop begging for external validation. If you're tired of living on the tightrope of others' approval, if you feel you've lost your footing trying to please everyone, if there's something inside you screaming for emotional independence, then these lessons will cut like a blade but heal like medicine. Because when you learn not to care about what doesn't matter, you finally discover what truly matters. The philosopher who dared to be common, Michel de Montaigne, was the first man in history to write about himself unapologetically. In the 16th century, when everyone was trying to impress with wisdom and virtues, he had the brutal courage to say, "I know nothing, and I'm going to write about it." For 20 years, he studied himself like a scientist studies a rare species. But here's what makes Montaigne revolutionary. He didn't write to prove he was special. He wrote to prove he was common, that he had fears, doubts, contradictions, that he changed his mind, that sometimes he was cowardly, sometimes courageous, sometimes wise, sometimes foolish. And in this, he found his genius. While other philosophers built perfect systems, Montaigne built something more valuable, a philosophy of imperfection, a radical acceptance of the human condition. He said that we are all made of the same common stuff, and that trying to be different from that is the source of all suffering. Imagine the courage that required in an era where the church controlled thought, where nobility demanded reverence, where being different meant social death. Montaigne simply said, "I am who I am, and I won't pretend to be someone else to please you." He discovered that real power isn't in being admired by everyone, but in not needing anyone's admiration to feel complete. That true strength comes from accepting your weaknesses, not hiding them. That you can be respected by being genuine, without needing to be perfect. And here lies Montaigne's most brutal lesson for modern man. You spend your life trying to be special, when true power lies in accepting that you are ordinary, and that this is extraordinary, because most people live fleeing from themselves. Montaigne stopped fleeing. He sat in his tower, wrote about his pains, his pleasures, his doubts, his provisional certainties, and discovered that when you fully accept who you are, the world stops having power over you, because you are no longer in the approval market. The art of not caring about opinions. There's a brutal difference between not caring out of coldness and not caring out of wisdom. Montaigne discovered that the opinions of others are like the wind. They change direction without warning. They can be strong today and weak tomorrow, and building your identity on something so unstable is like building a house on sand. He observed that the same men who praised him on Monday would criticize him on Tuesday, not because he had changed, but because circumstances changed, moods changed, interests changed. So why base your self-esteem on something as volatile as other people's moods? Other people's opinions say more about them than about you. When someone criticizes you, they are projecting their own fears, insecurities, frustrations. When someone praises you, they might be trying to use you or simply be in a good mood. Montaigne learned to see this as a theater where he didn't need to be an actor. But be careful. Not caring about opinions doesn't mean being insensitive or arrogant. It means understanding that you cannot control what others think of you, but you can control how much it affects you. It means listening to constructive criticism, but not allowing it to destroy your peace. Montaigne said he received praise and criticism with the same serenity because he knew that both were temporary, partial, incomplete. He knew his own flaws better than any critic, and he knew his qualities better than any admirer. Imagine the freedom of waking up knowing that you don't need to impress anyone today, that you can be yourself without fear of judgment, that your decisions are based on what's best for you, not on what will generate the least criticism. This is what Montaigne called appartenir, a soi-même, belonging to oneself. When you stop caring about others' opinions, 3 things happen. First, you stop wasting precious mental energy trying to predict what others think. Second, you make more authentic decisions based on your values, not others' values. Third, you attract people who respect your authenticity. Because in the end, the people who matter don't care about your imperfections, and the people who care about your imperfections don't matter. This is the brutal math of social life that mastered for centuries before us. The detachment from expectations. Montaigne discovered something that most men learn too late in life, that expectations are voluntary prisons we build for ourselves. When you expect something to happen in a specific way, you become a hostage to the outcome and lose the ability to appreciate what actually happens. He observed that the unhappiest men were those who had rigid plans for everything, who expected people to behave in certain ways, who demanded that life follow a predefined script. And when that didn't happen, and it never does, they became embittered, resentful, prisoners of their own expectations. Montaigne's genius lay in replacing expectations with curiosity. Instead of expecting his wife to be a certain way, he was curious to discover what she was really like. Instead of expecting friends to always act the same way, he accepted that people change, that they are complex, contradictory, unpredictable. This doesn't mean not having standards or accepting any behavior. It means understanding that you cannot control how others act, but you can control how you react. That your inner peace should not depend on the behavior of other people. Montaigne applied this to women as well. He said that men suffer because they create an ideal image of the perfect woman and then get frustrated when they discover that real women are human, imperfect, complex. He suggested that true love begins when you accept the person as they are, not as you would like them to be. Detachment from expectations is also detachment from results. You can strive, do your best, fight for your goals, but you cannot control whether you will succeed or not. When you accept this, paradoxically, you become more effective because you don't waste energy on anxiety about things you can't control. Imagine the freedom of entering a conversation without expecting it to end in a specific way, of starting a project without being attached to a particular outcome, of relating to people without demanding that they correspond to your fantasies. This is living in the pure present, without the distortions of expectations. Montaigne called this l'art de vivre, the art of living, and said it was the most difficult of all arts, because it requires you to accept life as it is, not as you think it should be. But when you master this art, you become invincible because nothing can deeply disappoint you. Inner sovereignty. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes he has spent years building his identity on foundations he didn't choose: parental approval, professional recognition, social status, feminine validation, and suddenly, all of it can collapse, leaving him lost, not knowing who he really is. Montaigne faced this crisis in his 30s when he lost his best friend and found himself questioning everything he believed about himself. It was then that he made the most radical decision of his life. He retired to his tower, began to write, and decided to discover who he was when no one was looking. The inner sovereignty he developed was not arrogance. It was emotional independence. It was the ability to sustain himself psychologically without needing constant validation from others. It was having his own center of gravity, an inner kingdom that no one could invade or destroy. This sovereignty begins with a brutal question. Who are you when you are completely alone? When you don't need to impress anyone? When there's no audience for your performances? When you can be totally honest with yourself? This naked person, without social masks, is your true self. Montaigne discovered that most men never know this person because they are afraid to be alone with them. They are afraid of discovering that perhaps they are not as special, as interesting, as important as they would like to believe. But he discovered that this common, imperfect, contradictory person was far more interesting than any persona he could create. Inner sovereignty also means having your own standards of success, not the standards society imposes. It means knowing what makes you happy, regardless of what makes others happy. It means having your own opinion, even if it's unpopular. It means being able to say no without justifying yourself. When you develop this sovereignty, 3 things happen. First, you stop seeking approval, because you already have the only approval that matters, your own. Second, you stop fearing rejection because you don't reject yourself. Third, you become magnetic because people sense when someone is complete in themselves. But be careful. Developing inner sovereignty is not a quick or easy process. Montaigne spent years writing about himself, questioning his motivations, confronting his contradictions, accepting his limitations. It's a daily work of self-knowledge and self-acceptance. The sovereign man doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Not because he is arrogant, but because he has already proven to himself that he is enough. He can love deeply without losing himself, can commit without annihilating himself, can be vulnerable without becoming dependent. The freedom to be imperfect. Perhaps Montaigne's greatest discovery was that perfection is a prison, and that true freedom begins when you accept and even celebrate your imperfections. He wrote about his fears, his inconsistencies, his changes of opinion, and discovered that this made him more human, not less. We live in an age where everyone pretends to have their life figured out, where social media shows only the perfect moments, where admitting weakness is seen as failure. Montaigne anticipated this collective neurosis by 500 years and offered the antidote: the courage to be publicly imperfect. He admitted that he changed his mind, that sometimes he was cowardly, that he had irrational preferences, that he could be petty or generous depending on his mood. And he discovered that this brutal honesty freed him, because when you accept your imperfections, they stop controlling you. The freedom to be imperfect means not needing to have all the answers, not needing to always be right, not needing to maintain an impeccable image. It means being able to make mistakes, learn, change direction, without feeling like a failure. It means accepting that you are a work in progress, not a finished product. This is especially liberating for men, because we are raised with the pressure to be strong, solve problems, have control over everything. When we accept that we don't have all the answers, that sometimes we need help, that we can feel lost or confused, we free ourselves from this impossible pressure. Montaigne discovered that when he stopped pretending to be perfect, people got closer to him because they saw a real person, not a facade. When he admitted not knowing something, people respected his honesty. When he showed vulnerability, people felt safe to show theirs. Imperfection is also creative. When you accept that you can make mistakes, you become more willing to try new things. When you accept that you can fail, you become more courageous to take risks. When you accept that you can change your mind, you become more open to learning. Imagine the freedom of waking up without having to maintain a perfect persona, of being able to admit when you don't know something, of being able to change your mind without feeling inconsistent, of being able to be vulnerable without feeling weak. This is what Montaigne offers, the liberation from the tyranny of perfection. And here's the paradox. When you accept your imperfections, you become more attractive, not less, because people feel they are in front of someone real, someone they can relax with, someone who won't judge them for their own flaws. 5 lessons from a man who lived 500 years ago but understood something that most of us still struggle to accept. That true power isn't in conquering the world, but in not needing to conquer anything. That real freedom begins when you stop begging for external approval. Montaigne teaches us that belonging to oneself is the greatest possible achievement. That not caring about others' opinions is not coldness, it's wisdom. That detaching from expectations is not giving up, it's liberating oneself. That developing inner sovereignty is not selfishness, it's necessity. That accepting imperfections is not conformity, it's courage. If you've made it this far, it's because something in you recognizes this truth. Something in you is tired of living for others, of constantly seeking validation, of building your identity on others' opinions, of pretending to be perfect when you are magnificently imperfect. So do as Montaigne did. Sit in silence with yourself. Look at your contradictions. Accept your limitations. Celebrate your peculiarities. And discover that the person you've always been, beneath all the social masks, is far more interesting than any persona you could create. The world doesn't need another man trying to impress. It needs men who impress by simply being themselves. Final call. I want to share something Montaigne never said, but certainly thought. For years, I lived like an actor, playing different roles for different audiences, changing my personality depending on who was present, trying to be what I thought others wanted me to be. It was by reading Montaigne's essays that I discovered that this constant performance was not just exhausting. It was a subtle form of personality suicide. I was slowly killing the person I truly was in the name of an acceptance that never truly came. If this video awakens something in you, if you recognized the burden of living to please others, if you are ready to begin the journey back to yourself, then I have something that goes beyond philosophical theories. I've created deep material on building emotional independence, based not only on Montaigne, but on centuries of wisdom about how to become sovereign of yourself. It's a practical guide for men who want to stop begging for approval and start living with their own dignity. Click the pinned comment and access the complete manual of inner sovereignty. But only access it if you are truly ready for the responsibility of being free. Because when you stop blaming others for your unhappiness, you also take credit for your joy. If this content made sense, leave a comment telling me which of my lessons impacted you the most, which social mask you are most tired of wearing. Subscribe, because the next video will explore something even deeper: the silent signs that you are living a life that isn't yours, and how Nietzsche can help you create your own values. I'll be here waiting for you, not as someone who has life figured out, but as someone who is also learning not to care about what doesn't matter, to finally care about what truly matters. See you in the next video. Be magnificently